Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Tuesday, August 25th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Ball State game in 11 days, the game against Michigan in 95 days. We're sponsored today by our friends at Jeff Ruby's of Columbus, proudly offering nationally acclaimed U.S.D.A. prime steaks, seafood and sushi, impeccable service, live entertainment, and an attention to detail that is simply unmatched. Just go to jeffruby.com/Columbus to check out the menu and make a reservation today. All right, so we just got a chance to talk to Ryan Day. I'm joined by Juck Miletti of BuckeyeInsiders.com. And Juck, I wanted to talk to you about some of the young players who certainly seem like they have made a big leap during fall camp. And a lot of these names are names you've probably heard us talking about this month, which, you know, that's good. That means we know what we're talking about, which is always a positive. But we'll start at the most exciting or most examined position on the field, the quarterback position. Everyone kind of knows what they've got with Julian Sayin. What's really interesting is that it seems like they're sort of figuring out what they've got with true freshman Luke Fahey.
It's extremely interesting, and we talked to Ryan Day last Saturday, and he said that Luke Fahey is pushing Tavian St. Clair, and he said he really is. He really wanted to enforce that, and now we roll into today, and I think the speculation was that for most of us that he would probably name the backup quarterback. That has not happened. The backup quarterback position has not been named. They will continue to battle for that backup spot rolling through this week here. And when we talk about Luke Fahey, a 5'11" freshman from Mission Viejo in California who ran an accelerated offense, one of these guys like Julian Sayin, who had a quarterback coach at a young age, who just comes in more prepared, and Dave praised his awareness, situational awareness, down and distance clock, that he comes in early, that he stays late, and apparently he's just been doing fantastic, and that's great. He was also, of course, asked about Tavian St. Clair. Is he doing anything wrong? And the answer is no, just experience. And I still think Tavian's ceiling, as high as it ever was, he just came in at a different level. And, we'll see what happens this year. But it is very interesting that Fahey's doing so well and promising.
Yeah, and, when he talked about the offensive line, everything he said about the offensive line was, we all know who the starting offensive line is going to be, but we're not going to announce it yet. The quarterback situation was really interesting because he talked about giving both Luke Fahey and Tavian St. Clair reps with the ones. That, to me, you're not just throwing reps around at this time of year. That's like the most valuable asset you have is practice reps and the ability to then watch film off of those and learn from those and all that kind of stuff. You're not throwing that around if this is we're going to just let everyone feel like they're still a part of the battle. Like that to me was kind of telling that this is really potentially a really interesting positional battle. Another interesting positional battle is at wide receiver, where they've got Jeremiah Smith, they've got Brandon Ennis. Feels like Devin McEwen has certainly earned a spot in that starting rotation, or that starting lineup of the top three. Kyle Parker has not played yet. So then he did say they're going to be looking at a rotation of maybe 6 or so guys. And so the 4 guys that leaves in terms of battling out for that spot, Des Jones, who we know had a good camp, Phillip Bell, who's had a good camp, and Brock Boyd and Chris Henry, the two true freshmen that we've been talking about since the spring. All 4 of those guys sound like they've made a real move this fall.
For sure. And Tony asked him, we're looking at 6, and they said, yeah, we're looking at 6. And Tony said, so the veterans, meaning the 4 that you just named, and then Brock Boyd and Chris Henry Jr., Ryan Day said yes. But then he also did bring up by name Phillip Bell and Des Jones, both play the slot, both who have looked really good this game. Matter of fact, Phil Bell, we were talking about last year at this time, about just, a guy who was just making play after play after play and hasn't really gotten a shot at Ohio State yet, but he's continued to do well. And I think a lot of people will be surprised about Des, who, there's been not much mention of him coming into this year, but he's had a great camp, and to get that shout out from Coach Day. And he did say, these guys are going to earn some playing time this year. So we're now talking 8 deep, and we haven't even talked about Jaquaden Guilford, the 5-star freshman who was ranked higher at Rivals than Chris Henry Jr. The wide receiver room depth is unbelievable. Ryan Day said better than last year, and I think that's pretty easy to see.
Yeah, they don't necessarily have a Carnell Tate, but, positions 3, 4, 5, 6, it feels like you would take a lot of the 2026 guys in those positions as compared to the guys who were there in 2025.
Agreed.
Other side of the ball, another guy who he mentioned by name that was kind of an okay, like if you get asked about a guy and the coach talks about the guy, that doesn't tell me that much. when Ryan Day gets asked about the defensive tackle rotation on the whole and mentions all the names you're sort of expecting him to mention and also says Damari Simeon's name, I go, okay, I'm listening.
Certainly not surprising to Buckeye insiders. Tony and I have been telling everybody since the spring that this was the guy that stood out to us. Not that Emmanuel Ruffin or Jameer Perez didn't also look very good, but it was Damari Simeon who was making the plays, and Damari Simeon, the first one out of Coach Day's mouth when we talk about these young guys. He didn't mention any other of the young guys with them. So very exciting stuff, and I noticed from the spring to the fall what Mick Marotti did with Damari Simeon's body, and obviously some hard work by Mick, but Damari, who was a little undersized compared to the other two, certainly height-wise, now looks like built like a sawed-off dude, and that is some big news. And Damari certainly sounds like he's going to get some play this year, so that's awesome.
So from Damari Simeon to Simeon Caldwell, this could be one of those old Wheel of Fortune before and after Damari Simeon Caldwell. Simeon Caldwell, Jay Timmons, two more names that we've been talking about a bunch on our insiders board, but you heard him come out of Ryan Day's mouth. Those are two true freshmen who sound like, based on what they've done this month, they are going to be playing meaningful reps, not just week 1 against Ball State, but presumably week 2 at Texas.
Jay Timmons certainly not going to surprise anyone, as that's been obviously the big-time defensive freshman of this season, and a guy who's potentially going to earn a starting role when we at least play a lot, and we've all known that for a while. But Simeon Caldwell is one that probably going to surprise some people. Simeon Caldwell, a top 200 guy from outside of Jacksonville, at the Bulls School, Tim Walton's sister's son, his actual nephew. And, that's a guy that came in and a lot of people were thinking this guy's probably going to end up just moving to linebacker and we wouldn't see much from him this year. Not the case. Simeon Caldwell, a really intelligent, smart player, and certainly has been making his hay. To get that mention from Ryan Day, that was serious. That's a guy that's going to play, and that surprised me to hear him say that, to single him out of that group. Blaine Bradford, we've not heard about yet. So Simeon Caldwell, the first safety that we've really heard Ryan Day talk about playing.
Yeah, and that may be almost he's got a role kind of thing where, that's probably like in the dime package or like a big nickel kind of thing where he's got a little bit more size. He might sort of fit in a little bit of a different role because they have plenty of other talent in that safety room. He was asked about Terry Moore and Leroy Roker, but it feels like Simeon Caldwell might fit a little bit of a different niche than those guys do, which that will obviously, in addition to being intelligent and athletic and all of the other stuff, will help get you on the field relatively early. So you want to get in on this info relatively early. The best place to do that is at BuckeyeInsiders.com. We've been sharing all sorts of camp intel with our members there on the Insiders board, giving you notes from scrimmages, notes from practices, what we're hearing, what we're seeing, all that good stuff. If you want to support what we do, that is the best way to do it. Sign up there to become a member, get access to our whole team of insiders. Tony and I covering the team, Juck covering recruiting, Ross and Michael covering scheme and X's and O's, Marcus Hartman covering basketball, plus that really fun and active community. We got some fun events already on the schedule for this fall, live events. You want to hang out, get to hang out, spend some quality time with your favorite Buckeye insiders. You can do that. Just sign up today at BuckeyeInsiders.com. And thanks again to our friends at Jeff Ruby's of Columbus, the award-winning upscale steakhouse in downtown Columbus, named one of the top 50 steakhouses in America by Food Network. Just go to jeffruby.com/Columbus to check out the menu and make a reservation today. That will do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We will talk to you tomorrow.